Welcome. Welcome. I am so grateful to see all of you here supporting these amazing fellows. My name is Deanna Jimenez. I am core faculty in the somatic psychology department here at CIIS, and also have had the honor to support these scholars on their fellowship journey. I am beyond grateful for this grant that has afforded us the opportunity for Black identified students at CIIS to be supported in community as they integrate their course studies with Black psychology and in the service of Black communities. At this time, I would like to introduce three key people whose work and involvement have continued to play an essential role in this grant being possible, way before I even came along and started supporting. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Adeeba Deterville. Dr. Adeeba Deterville is core faculty in the School of Undergraduate Studies, Bachelor's of Science in Psychology, and the founding director for the Center of Black and Indigenous Praxis. Dr. D.
Hey, hi everybody. Hi. So good to be in CIIS community. I love being in CIIS community, as any of you who have met me know. And it's so beautiful to see familiar names and faces here today. So I'm going to do my very best to be concise. And I know those of you who know me know that that is a real challenge. So it's going to sound like a long story because I'm going to start in the Wayback Machine. So way back, I used to be a community development officer for two large national banks, international banks, one of which was Citibank, and the other was Wells Fargo. And I can't remember if it was when I was with Citibank or if it was with Wells Fargo that I first got introduced to Huckleberry. And in my role as a community development officer, I was tasked with identifying nonprofit organizations in the community that were doing exemplary work in affordable housing, family development, economic development, and so forth. And we would provide funding to support them and technical assistance and so forth. And so that's how I first came to know Huckleberry. They were one of my grantees and part of my portfolio that I managed, and we funded them. And years later, I left that career and came to CIIS as a student to finish my bachelor's degree. And it was an experience that I had in that bachelor's degree program that really set me on the course that I'm on today, which is making sure that Black and Indigenous voices are heard, recognized, valued, and appreciated, and well positioned within the curriculum. And so in that process, I began with the encouragement and the love and support of Rachel. She saw something in me that I didn't even realize that I had, which was this 30 plus history with the Association of Black Psychologists and a passion and a love for the lived Black experience, particularly through the epistemology and ontology of the Association of Black Psychologists and Black Psychology. So I would often have in my cubicle, because I was at that time the program coordinator for the Master's in Counseling Psychology department. So I had an opportunity to see all of the curriculum that was being utilized throughout all 5 concentrations in our Master's in Counseling Psychology departments. And I would bring literature, African-centered material, scholarship, and have it placed all around my desk. And students, Black students, would come to me with questions around struggles that they were having about not being visible in the curriculum. When they would attempt to bring their lived experiences into the classroom, they would oftentimes be met with resistance. Faculty didn't really know how to support them, and so forth and so on. And so through the wisdom and guidance and support of Rachel, who at that time was the director of the Mental Health Service Act grant program, we put our Hey Rachel, Hey Adeeba heads together and created the very first ABSI MHSA cohort, which was a group of students, Black students, that we identified through those 5 concentrations and took them through a year-long process, a deep dive into the world of the pedagogy, the epistemology, ontology of African Black psychology. and connected them to the Association of Black Psychologists. And that in 2015 became the foundation for what is now today the Black Psychology Project. So we are in our 6th or 7th iteration of the BPP. It's now officially a part of CIIS. It is rooted in my meta theory called Sankofa Praxis, which is really centered around the concept of jegnaship, which is an intentional relational process of knowing and knowledge production and knowledge transfer. And so with that intentionality, we have a cohort of self-identified Black students that we really groom to step into their sense of self as African people and into leadership roles. And so this year, I'm very, very happy that LaTronda Lumpkins, who was the program assistant last year, is now the program project assistant, is now the project manager. And Ahsabi, who was a participant in the jegnaship cohort, is now the project assistant. And so that jegnaship process has allowed us to continue to sustain ourselves. And so one day, there was this wonderful person wandering around San Francisco who happened into Huckleberry, and they asked, is there anything happening that you would like for me to assist with? And it's like, yeah, we want one of those BPP things. Can you help us get one of those? And sure enough, we hadn't really publicly advertised the BPP. It was just simply because our people, our cohort graduates were out in the world doing good work, and that energy was being recognized. And so we were blessed to have a funder come to us seeking out our resources, and that birthed the Emerging Black Clinicians Fellowship Program. And so that seed that was planted way back in 2010, when I was irritated by what an experience that I had in the classroom, has now blossomed and flourished not only into my scholarship and not only into the Black Psychology Project, but the Emerging Black Clinicians Fellowship, and now the Center for Black and Indigenous Praxis. So I'm just thrilled and can't wait to see what more there is to come. We're just getting started. And so thank you. It's so beautiful to be on this opportunity to flourish and to grow and to see, where Blackness is going to take us next.
Thank you so much, Dr. D. Thank you for your vision and your commitment to these students. And your vision and your work has made it possible for me to do what I'm enjoying and loving so much. So thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Rachel Bryant, Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Rachel.
Greetings, everyone. This is history for CIIS. But before I go there, I must thank the ancestors. All of our ancestors, we are their wildest dreams. Our ancestors who gave their very lives, who sacrificed so much for us to be in this sort of 1% of Black people who have master's degrees or doctorate degrees or any degrees or education. I just want to honor and thank them for all of the love that they continue to give us from their realm. We are gathered here today in their honor, and I appreciate each and every one of you for being here today. This is a first. This is the first cohort. You all are the first students presenting from this cohort. This is the first time in CIIS history that we've been able to directly support Black students in the way that this grant does. I understand all of the barriers that we face, right? The barriers not only through the curriculum and pedagogy with which Adeeba alluded to, and which I experienced as a Black student in the community mental health program. I was frustrated. I was always code switching from Eurocentric psychodynamic theory to what I thought would work in the community that literally asked me to be their therapist, because the therapist that they were getting out at Youth Uprising in Oakland didn't believe their lived experiences, didn't understand, became fearful or voyeuristic of their experiences. So this is history, and I'm here to support all of you and encourage all of you, not only through your time as students at CIIS, but beyond. you know, and again, going back to the ancestors who didn't have this opportunity, nor did they have the opportunity for mental health care services in the way that we offer them now. Certainly, they found ways to take care of themselves. I want to, in particular, thank the vision of Dr. Adeeba Deterville. She shared that history that we've been building upon for more than a decade. I want to thank Deanna Jimenez, who, when we got this grant, I immediately connected with you, again, the ancestors at work, and you said yes to this project. And I want to thank each and every student who stepped up to take advantage of this unique opportunity. And most of all, I want to thank the funder who gave generously because they understood the barriers to licensure and even to graduation for Black mental health care providers. So I am here in full support with my whole heart. I'm looking forward to the presentations today and in the weeks to come. And I won't keep us from that. Thank you for inviting me to say a few words, Deanna. And thank you for all of the work that you do. You go above and beyond, I think, what your job description is in this grant. And you are seen and appreciated.
I appreciate you all. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you all too for the acknowledgement. I appreciate you, Rachel, for the advocacy and the leadership and the, hey, Dr. D, hey, Rachel, whatever those conversations were, I am like so appreciative that we are here now. Next, I would like to introduce Heidi Wells. Heidi Wells is the clinical director at Huckleberry Youth Programs. And Huckleberry Youth has been named already by Dr. D. So thank you, Heidi, for being here, and take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here and to be with all of you. In listening to you speak, Rachel, it just dawned on me how jealous I feel that you all have this wonderful opportunity cohort. When I got my master's degree, I was one of 4 Black students. My cultural competency class was led by a white teacher. So, so it makes me so thrilled for you that you have this opportunity. And I also feel a bit of jealousy. So again, I am Heidi Wells. I am the clinical director at Huckleberry Youth Programs. I am also a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have a private practice specializing in complex trauma and PTSD and trauma related to Black and Indigenous communities, codependency and addiction. So in short words, I'm usually really busy. Huckleberry Youth Programs, if you know about us, if you don't, we've been around in San Francisco for over 50 years, since 1967. And we've been working with underserved and marginalized youth to support them, provide therapy services, educate and inspire them. And we have been building this relationship with CIIS over the past few years. I think we got started before the pandemic. And it was based on alignment with our mission and values and projects like this very one. I know I immediately, when I met Rachel, we had this immediate bond, and I said, I don't know what she's doing, but I want to get involved. And so I think we met at a project. Was that a school fair, a practicum fair? But in any case, I was thrilled and really wanted to get involved. Here's some of the reasons why. The Black communities continue to suffer tremendous hardships. 25% of students and youth seek therapy services. So think about that, and all the students that go to your school, what is the main reason that they're not seeking services? It's the lack of diversity in the therapist population. And so with such scarcities in the mental health profession and being able to find a therapist of color, Black folks don't come to therapy and they don't feel that they're going to be comfortable enough to share race-related issues, cultural issues, trauma-related issues. Maybe my trauma doesn't match their idea of trauma. And so statistically wise, the statistics are really scary. 76% of therapists in the United States are white. 76%. 10% are Asian, 6% Latino, and 4% are Black. 4%. So that number is so low. That number, just so you know, has not increased since 2010. So in the last 12 years, it hasn't increased at all. So that's why I'm here. I'm passionate about being a therapist. I'm passionate and invested in the community. I'm invested in the work that you're doing in increasing Black therapists and psychologists in the community. And this is also part of Huckleberry's vision of advancing conversations in diversity and equity and inclusion as it specifically relates to therapists of color entering the field of psychology, whether it's agency work or nonprofit settings where the need is great. So I'm not going to talk on and on, or I can go for an hour, but I'm here for you. If you're interested in following up about Huckleberry, if you're looking for a mentor, someone to talk to and ask questions about the field of psychology. I've been doing this for 15 years and I'm happy to help anyone. And I'll put my information in the chat. Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Yes, please put your information in the chat. Your partnership is valuable and your organization's story really represents why this fellowship is so essential. So thank you for being here, for supporting us, and yep, got your information. Oh, so now, deep breath. Let's introduce our speakers. Just a little bird's eye view. This is one of 4 presentations. This is a presentation series. If you registered via Zoom, each time you have to register. It's the same registration link, but each time you need to register for each week. So this is one, and we will be going all the way through October 20th. We have a total of 10 fellows this past cohort, and they will be presenting in either groups of 2 or 3 over these next 4 weeks. Yes. I would like to begin by introducing our first speaker. This afternoon, we are hearing from Alyssa Williams and Ahsabi-Monique Burris. So first, we will begin with Alyssa Williams, who is a 2024 graduate candidate, Masters of Arts in Counseling Psychology, Expressive Arts. Hello, Alyssa.
Hi, everyone. Do you want me to go ahead and start and share? Okay, I didn't know if you wanted to introduce one next. Okay. All right, so once you all are able to see my screen, let me know. And
Yes, we can see it.
okay, thank you. So hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Alyssa Williams. As Deanna was saying, I'm in my 2nd year of the Expressive Arts Therapy program. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be a participant in this fellowship and to have this opportunity to present on a topic of interest to me. So before I get into it, I know we've all had busy days. I just kind of wanted to provide a grounding moment for us. So I'm kind of just going to lead through a quick breathing exercise if you want to participate. Okay, so if you want to kind of feel into, if you're in your chair, if you're sitting down, maybe on a couch, a comfortable chair. If you want to feel your feet into the ground, kind of feel where your toes are at, maybe kind of stretch out your hands a little bit, maybe even close your eyes and take a deep breath for 5, 3, 2, 1. Maybe breathe out. And then just one more time. And then breathe out. Right. So now that we're centered, I'll introduce my topic, which is identifying autistic traits in Black children through artistic expression. So as a background as to why I chose this topic, I worked at a school for about a year in after school care, and I encountered a young girl. She was a young Black girl. She was in kindergarten, and I'm going to refer to her as Rosalind just to keep her anonymous, but she approached indoor and outdoor play very differently from her peers. She focused more on sensory stimulating play in the sandbox. She built a lot of sandcastle structures. She gathered a lot of mulch. She stacked a lot of leaves in the forest, and it all made sense to her. She was hypersensitive to her clothing textures. She would also experience emotional shutdowns if she was overly stimulated by the environment. She struggled with focus in some of her classes, but thoroughly enjoyed socializing. Her calm state was further calmed by the methods of sensory play that she used. She was assumed to be on the autism spectrum by initial early assessments. However, her age prevented her from a full or complete diagnosis, as the school wanted to wait until past first grade, even entering second grade, to evaluate further. And just in my experience in communicating with her and playing with her in a lot of those different settings that she loved, it helped me to see how unique and artistic neurodiverse children are, specifically the neurodiverse Black children. And she inspired me to look deeper into this topic and to understand whether there were some barriers to further diagnosis for her because of different ways that she was presenting some of the traits that may not have aligned with original criteria. Okay, so to kind of jump into it, this is art by 3 different Black autistic individuals from left to right. So Ronaldo Bird, Caleb Hansen, and Chamel Ford. I'll give you a moment to just absorb it. So it was, shown in a Prism article. So Prism's an independent and nonprofit newsroom, and it focuses on collective liberation, justice for people, and a way of presenting and communicating their ideas and self-expression. And so in this article, it highlighted different Black autistic individuals and how they got into their creativity. And one of the quotes that stood out to me was by Ronaldo Bird. And he had said, first, when he was a very young toddler, he said, "I did a lot of finger painting, and my mother did not mind if I got paint all over the place." So for her, when I was in my teens, the natural progression was for me to paint murals on the walls. It was a part of the exploration of how many art mediums I was good at. She says the art I create never gets old, and she can look at it all day. And the way that stood out to me was because he said he painted murals on the walls. And I know if any of us have the same parents that I do, they wouldn't have allowed that. And so I thought that was showing initial openness by just his mother, and seeing that he wanted to be creative in this way, and allowing that creativity to flourish. So I wanted to highlight this work by them, right? So some of the creative expression impacts that were highlighted in the article, so how they brought them up was that if they were feeling overwhelmed in their senses, say for example, sight or sound, they would then pick up or be drawn to a certain medium, whatever was available to them in their resources. And the outcomes that were documented for them were alleviation of anxiety, calming of senses, improved focus, centering of thoughts, nonverbal self-expression, healthy coping mechanisms, confidence building, emotional regulation, and identity acceptance. Does anyone have any initial thoughts on these creative expression impacts? Maybe just a word that comes to mind for you when you look at these outcomes.
Ditto.
Yep, I love that.
It also like feels to me kind of like a linear progression and hierarchy of like what's necessary in order to get to
Right.
like identity acceptance. So it's like, you know, itself is on a spectrum
Right,
of what's needed.
definitely. Thank you all for sharing. Okay. All right, so that brings me into the creative approach. So I'm presenting this as a tool, potentially for use with different therapies. So for children, you know, even speaking on Rosalind earlier, she enjoyed sand play. And so even I know for her, she experienced play therapy before, but I know cognitive behavioral is also very popular, humanistic theories integrated into these therapies, and also focusing on different intersections of identity. But I want to get into the background of it, the study that it was developed through and what it is. And then I want to be interactive, of course, and include all of you in walking through an example. So to start, so it was a study conducted and it was taking those diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder versus what's considered typical development. So in the study, they wanted to look at the verbal and figurative creativity levels of the autism spectrum disorder individuals and the typical development individuals. So in the study, they noticed that their initial assumptions of the individuals with ASD having a less of a creativity scale was actually not true. Those individuals had a greater creativity scale for metaphor generation, which was falling under the verbal creativity category. So to kind of give a little bit of background example over that. So with figurative language, you might have the athlete is on fire. So saying Steph Curry was bomb in that game, right? That would be more considered figurative language versus the verbal creativity of taking even very like separate ideas and crossing them into each other, saying like the house is such a dog. And maybe you've connected different meanings to connect that to each other, but maybe not as obvious as the figurative language that we often hear. So with this task, it's essentially a new way of expressing conceptual meaning. So they would provide the child with a literal sentence. They may provide the child with a metaphorical one, but if not, they would then just go into focusing on an action within the sentence structure. They would then have the child brainstorm similar meanings and then have the child construct a metaphorical sentence from said meanings. And then lastly, they would have a reflection period on the word choices that were used, as well as identification of any verbal or figural creativity measures for whoever was assessing in the moment. So to walk through an example with you all, I'm going to give you a sentence and give you some room to participate in this. So if the sentence was, the party ended as soon as she left. Let's go into that sentence. The party ended as soon as she left. And let's highlight the word ended. What are some similar meanings to the word ended that you can think of in the moment? They can be broad interpretations or even direct ones, and you can just blurt it out.
Done.
Final.
But boring.
What was the last one you said? Is that
Me?
might have been someone
I said,
one.
oh, I'm sorry. I said final.
Final. Okay. Right. Some other ones might be death, explosion, a change of position. So the branch off of that to taking what you all have as your words, you would then substitute that into the sentence. So if you were saying death was the word you wanted to use, you would say the party died as soon as she left. So that is what this task looks at. And if you all want to do another example, let me know. But that's a
Could I? Could I, with something that you had said previously, you
Yes.
said Seth Curry was on fire in that game. And then you leap to he was bomb in that game. But so if a bomb is detonated, you would assume that there's a fire. But what you could also say is Steph Curry went off in that game. You know what I'm saying? And so going off is like a bomb exploding. And so you're kind of doing the same thing where you're connecting those two, but like in a totally different way that has both of those assumptions like built into it. Is that it? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I was
No, that's actually great. Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. It's that was leaning towards figural language, but if you presented that as a sentence to an individual or a child specifically, then they could then take that meaning of on fire and change it to, oh, well, it's associated with fire, so bomb, or something else like explosion. But so you're completely on track. Yep. So thank you. Great. Does anyone else have any comments on that or questions or anything that they want to say about that? No. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's get into some of the outcomes. So when you think about the concepts of like generating metaphors, for the individual participating in that process, it's a calming process. It's their version of artistic expression, even though you're providing them with structure. So some of the outcomes for these individuals in the study were they could learn about strengths-focused care. So initially, imagine getting an assessment and someone saying, you have a very low scale of creativity, or reading about ASD and seeing them denote, individuals with ASD as being lower on the scale for developing figural language, or developing a nonverbal way of communicating only, and being boxed into that meaning. So as these individuals were participating in this, they could see their own strengths. And what that alludes to is offering a tool to be used to help individuals with ASD, and specifically those who have not been diagnosed yet, see the strengths and where they might see deficiencies. Also, this alludes to easier identification of difficult tasks, even earlier diagnosis. So that's, of course, what I wanted to highlight through the anecdote that I provided earlier. So using this as a tool to assess children in different forms of therapy that can then lead to early development of emotional regulation, assurance for caregivers, and knowing that the traits that they might have identified can also be supported by others. So think even school counselors, even a clinician if the child is seeing a clinician. So proper resources provided to caregivers is essential. And it's really essential across the board in any type of diagnosis, but specifically in this one, and also with the age of diagnosis, oftentimes caregivers can feel like they are in a desert with no assistance and no help, and given a broad interpretation of a diagnosis and not understanding where to start. So the development of confidence within the social dynamics is also what the study highlighted for these individuals, and understanding that they can be and use verbal language to be creative, but to also show their uniqueness and how their neurodiversity is a strength. Right. So I want to, before I move on, just say that the study did compile data from over, I think it was like 4 different countries, and it was over 6 different studies on different ethnicities, nationalities, identities, in reference to language ability, to kind of show how inclusive that was. Right. Okay, so to give you all a highlight, so autism spectrum disorder, so ASD, this is per, of course, the DSM-5 diagnostic statistical manual. So persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts, as manifested by the following. So deficits in ability to engage in social interactions between 2 or more people, deficits in nonverbal communication and relationship development, restricted repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. So you might see this through inflexible routines. So maybe wanting to wake up exactly at 7:59 and go sit down and eat the same exact, bowl of cereal, same exact bowl, in a very specific manner of motor movements and repetitive motor movements, fixated and hyper restricted interests. And then of course, the hyper or hypo reactivity to sensory input. So either they are overwhelmed often by the environment. They either feel a lot of that emotion from others, or they're hyporeactive. So they might have issues feeling pain or temperature if they're touching something hot. All right, so prevalence with gender and age. So I have this kind of flipped, but boys are diagnosed at a rate of 4.2 times greater than girls are with ASD. And also 1 in 44 8-year-old US children are diagnosed. So this is offering a look into maybe potential misdiagnosis. So what a lot of studies were examining was the rate at which Black children were diagnosed with ADHD. They were diagnosed with ADHD at a rate of 5.1 times greater than white children. For conduct disorder, Black children were diagnosed at a rate of 2.4 times that of white children. All right, so that is giving a synopsis of comorbidities potentially, but also potential misdiagnoses. So for more of the racial variances in ASD diagnosis, so 2.55% of white children are diagnosed. Black children are 19% less likely to be diagnosed than white children. Hispanic children are 65% less likely to be diagnosed than white children. Okay, so cultural and systemic barriers to diagnosis. So first I have stigma. Before I get into this, I want to pause and allow you all the opportunity to provide any further barriers that you might see to diagnosis. You can just blurt it out too. Has anyone had a family member or friend or colleague that has experienced misdiagnosis or potentially has experienced a diagnosis of ADHD or ASD as a comorbidity? No, okay. So
Yes.
getting in, you said yes, okay. So just offering a snapshot of what some cultural or systemic barriers could be. So stigma, this refers to really specifically the Black community. This is more anecdotal, but a lot of people might be able to relate to this. My grandparents and parents were not for therapy. They said that that was for weaker people, and that, to be strong, you had to just suffer through it. And, that getting any type of mental health assistance was seen as something that would isolate you from your community. So that stigma provides one of the first barriers to diagnosis for these individuals, because the parent might see a potential diagnosis as them being less intelligent or unable to assimilate into a mass culture. Secondly, the staffing shortages in the education system. I included this because specifically during COVID, there was a lot of teacher shortage that grew from a lot of teachers quitting, maybe due to malpractice in the schools with, whether they were afraid of getting COVID or they already were struggling with the virtual environment. But what this also related to was even school counselors not being as present in the public education system specifically. Okay, so third here I have school funding. So this could also be attributed to COVID, but just in general, before COVID existed, there was always an inequality with the amount of resources that different school systems have. This fourth one I have listed is called masking of symptoms. So masking is often done by young girls who may have originally exhibited traits of ASD, specifically because they want to assimilate, but also because it's considered less appropriate for women, young girls, to be socially isolated versus the boys. It was more acceptable for them. Take a moment. Okay. And so then, of course, I included the misdiagnosis of symptoms. So that is a barrier, and really to expand upon the ADHD and the conduct disorder diagnoses, that's often related to what the teacher, who may be of a different culture, may see the Black student as disruptive to the class. They may see them as unable to learn properly, unable to communicate with their peers effectively, but what is never considered is their environment. Are they in a predominantly white environment, or just a predominantly, non-Black environment that pushes them so far out of their comfort zone that they act out? So those different, how you would just say, social settings and environments are important to consider. Does anyone have any comments on what I've included?
I wanted to just add, I think it's close to stigma, but the idea too of medical trauma and systemic trauma in regards to diagnoses, health, shame, and judgment in that same space.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you.
Time check.
What did you say? Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Time check.
Oh, time check. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we're actually on our summary slide. So to summarize what we've talked about here, ASD is a group of neurodevelopmental disorders affecting socio-emotional reciprocity, communication, and sensory responses to the world. That metaphor generation task can help identify traits of ASD within Black children's creativity levels. That focus on community resources is important to conquer barriers to diagnosis. And yeah, that's what I wanted to highlight from the study. I encourage you all to go and maybe even read through it. I have it in the references on this last slide, but I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me speak about this topic. So opening up the floor, are there any questions?
Hi. I'm sorry.
Go
Rachel?
ahead. I'll go next.
Okay.
Oh, who is it now? Rachel speaking? Okay.
Alyssa, it's
hi.
Kelly.
Ooh, okay.
Everybody, we are allowed.
You will do Demi, Kelly, Rachel.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, my name is Demi. She, her
Hi.
pronouns. I have a question because during my undergraduate program, I took Dr. Nick Walker's Intro to Neurodivergent class, and we learned a lot about pathology paradigm and the neurodivergent paradigm. And I'm just interested to know why you chose to use like autism-spectrum and also neurodivergent, because I don't know, there's thoughts that I have around like this notion of a spectrum from learning about the pathology paradigm and also like the decolonization of like our mind bodies and the language that we use around it, and the notion of like being on a spectrum of something and how that compares to like, I don't know, like colonial thinking. So I'm just curious as to the language around like you using autism spectrum.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I use the spectrum first off because the studies use the same language, and I wanted to adhere specifically to what they were trying to expand upon, but also because there was a move away from using terms like Asperger's, high functioning versus low functioning, because it further limited the individuals that were diagnosed with ASD to a point where they felt like if they couldn't achieve more than what their diagnosis was, specifically if they were considered low functioning. And so the spectrum then shifts them into almost expands their ability to develop their strengths. And that's what was highlighted, in those studies too, was strengths-focused care and how we can highlight their strengths and not only just talk about their deficiencies. And so using that language was important to keep consistent.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Alyssa, it's Kelly. I just wanted to say congratulations. And I really learned so much from your presentation. And I just want to give you some call and response and say, it just really warmed my heart. And I'm really proud of you. And I'm really just honored and privileged to have gone through this with you. And I just wanted to give you some love.
Thank you, Kelly. Same to you.
Alyssa, excellent presentation. You have a style that is very clear and calming so that the audience can receive the information, and it was just excellent content. And my question for you is, why do you personally care about this topic, and how does it relate to your plans as a future therapist in the Black community?
Yeah. So with that initial anecdote with the child Rosalind that I encountered, the reason why it resonated with me was because I had the exact same experiences when I was her age. And it made me think deeper about the potential, I guess even, I don't even want to say like being sensory limited, but seeing yourself in someone who is so young and seeing the strengths that they have instead of just like what's considered a deficit, but to her was considered a strength. That's where I felt connected to it. I had a lot of experiences of my mom telling me that, I didn't talk in daycare. I just didn't talk to anybody. I didn't say anything. And, me not wanting to engage in certain social situations, not wear certain clothing. And I thought about it deeper. And it's not to say that, I'm diagnosing myself with that, but just the opportunity to understand, how those differences are a good thing. Because often I feel like you are always told that your lack of speaking is an issue. And I experienced that with my corporate job that I left before entering the program. I always got, you're so quiet, you don't talk. And I thought about it and I was like, well, when do I have something to say? How do I express myself? And so I think that's where I felt that deeper connection, just being transparent. And I think your second question or part to the question was it about like moving forward? How do I further develop the interest in the topic? What was the second part of it?
The second part is, how do you think you will carry this knowing forward in your work as a therapist in the Black community?
Yeah, I think mainly in understanding language differences with a lot, that happens a lot within the Black community. So with the metaphor generation task, the one thing that they didn't bring up was AAVE and how, the African-American vernacular English and how the way that a Black child might express even a metaphor or figural creativity in a sentence may not make sense to the person assessing them, but it's still very important to examine and look at. And that's the key that I want to take forward, is how can I further expand upon that to show them like, well, some of the words we've used like on fleek or period or certain things may not make sense to a lot of people, but what if a child is using that same language to communicate their creativity and language? And how can we use that to identify those traits of ASD? So I think that's where the key piece I want to take out of it and focus on. Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
I think, so this topic is personal for me. As you mentioned, having family members that may be on the spectrum, and then in this clinical work that we'll be doing, right? I just started my practicum, so I don't have direct experience, but my question is, what brought you to focus on that population? Do you have a personal connection to it, or was it just from your work?
Yeah, it was the student I encountered at my job, but also I was kind of talking to Rachel about that a little bit with my own experiences with being misunderstood and how I've expressed my emotions, what type of language I've used, and being able to connect to these individuals who feel like they're stifled, specifically in their artistic abilities and creativity. See, what was good about the Prism article was that Ronaldo said his mother let him paint on the walls and let him paint murals and let him, throw sand everywhere. And so I felt a connection to that because I was like, how many of us have been stifled in that? And specifically, moving away from standard language, but just in expressing yourself as a child, if you already are struggling with social dynamics, if you're already struggling with developing your language, something that hinders you more can be your own caregivers. And so if we give them a tool like this and say, work with them in this language area, right? Work with them in this, then it gives them something they can be assured in. So that just kind of answers it in a little different way.
Thank you for the answer. You are a gift to this population. I can see so much for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm on Spotlight and I was just really enjoying the presentation and taking some time to breathe for myself because I felt so deeply touched by not only how you clearly presented it, but also how personal this work is. For you, I say for myself as a clinician, like the paths that we choose, the population we choose, there is always some thread of connection I experience. And so thank you so much, Alyssa, for your presentation. Yeah, I'm imagining that being able to share these tools will be not only supporting in diagnosis, but also supporting in deeper connection with the clinician and the client. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I am excited to introduce our next speaker. And I'm also just sitting with the appreciation of being able to call Alyssa and our next presenter, Ahsabi-Monique Burris, emerging Black clinicians. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ahsabi-Monique Burris, who is a 2023 graduate candidate in the Masters of Arts in Counseling Psychology. Thank you.
Hi all. Okay, give me a moment. I'm going to share my screen, but I need to follow the directions to do that. So just give me a moment.
While you share your screen, I would love for anyone who wants to share appreciations for Alyssa's presentation, please do so in the chat.
Yes. Oh, sorry, with the chat.
Thank you for your participation.
Okay, can you see my screen or not? You see it?
No.
Not yet.
Just a minute. share to Zoom, then present, share to Zoom, and then present. I believe I'm going to ask Jennifer Larsh, since you're in the room and we were talking earlier, can you help me share it? Because I don't.
Start with the regular Zoom share down at the bottom. So you should have the clear screen with the Zoom screen up. Start with that first.
Okay, hold on.
And then you can go into presenter mode.
Okay, share screen. And oh, I think it's this one.
Yes.
Okay.
Ooh, got it.
I'm not, okay, here we go. Yay! Okay. All right. So I'm going to do my presentation today. First, I'm going to remind you, my name is Ahsabi-Monique Burris. I'm excited to be here and so grateful for this opportunity that we have been afforded by all of Dr. Deterville's work and all of Rachel's work and all of Deanna's work. I really appreciate the opportunity to be in this position. So my presentation is about working with middle school to high school girls. Really, the age group is between 11 and 15. And I designed a after school club called the Girls After School Life Strategy Club. And it's a workshop. Wait, hold on. I want this to go away. Move it. Yes. Okay. So the demographic of these students that I'm interested in working with are 12 to 15-year-old girls. They have a low SES or socioeconomic status. They're brown and Black. Some may be mixed, but they live a Black experience. This workshop culminated with a showcase at the end, or will culminate with the showcase at the end. And the girls in my previous experience repurposed a popular song to represent the work they'd done. And that song became an anthem based on their participation. So I worked when I was in college with the Girls After School Academy. That was located in San Francisco. Right outside of Hunters Point, and the Visitación Valley is where it was located. So it wasn't purely Black space. It was not purely a Black space, but the girls that were there were Black and brown. Okay. Some of the challenges or issues that these young girls had were generally anxiety and depression. Most of that was connected to their school and to various stressors that they were having in their family unit. Clearly, being in a lower SES is stressful in and of itself. So that compounded with family issues, you know, partners that had split up, multiple children in the household, you know, there was lots of stress. And And so one of the problems, or how it was manifested, was in their school performance. They had a lot of difficulty with basic subjects like math and reading. And most girls who were part had these issues at Gaza, the Girls After School Academy. Again, or not again, one of the issues that was mentioned in the after school program from parents who also worked in the school was around cliques and bullying, certain students being excluded, etc. So, all right. Sorry about that. So that was Gaza. That was back in 2000. And in 2009, I was working at another school in Oakland. And at this school, I was working for Dr. Danielle Drake, who works in the Center for Black and, oh no, she's in the DEI office, I think. And she was the program, she was the head of the EXA program. So it's interesting that I had this experience before starting as a student here. With Creation Cocoon for Girls, we did after school creative arts workshops. And they would sometimes be, you know, crochet, you know, children would make dances, they'd write poetry. And ultimately I brought in something else that's dear to my heart, which is body product creation or manufacture. So I brought that into Creation Cocoon. We had many conversations, especially between the participants. I was just there and I was kind of ear hustling, but listening to these children converse about stresses and challenges and successes and good things. It was just a really wonderful way to ascertain kind of like where they were and what sorts of things were on their minds. The group was really good because the students would show each other mutual aid. When, you know, if a student was going through something difficult or had a challenge, they would kind of like talk it out while they were crocheting or making products, and it was soothing for them. It was, you know, really, it was really about co-regulation in that moment. And so that was a very powerful phenomenon that I witnessed in my work with Creation Cocoon. We culminated the workshop series with like a product fair, and the parents of the students would come to the site, to the school, and like purchase their products or, you know, receive whatever products that were created for them over the course of the year. So with that background, here I am. Now I'm in grad school and I'm learning about all these different theories and really examining my own positionality as a future therapist. And so I'm fundamentally a womanist thinker, very, very much influenced by principles within the womanist paradigm. I like darkened narrative inquiry, which I'm actually still learning about, but certainly it speaks to me just in its name, right? The endarkened narrative speaks to me. I have a lot to say, and I happen to be a dark woman. Before I started with this trajectory, I was very much influenced by the humanistic perspective, the humanistic theoretical perspective, which really speaks about like the importance of self-actualization. And throughout the different episodes in my life, I have leaned into this idea of self-actualization. And so I consider myself a healer, scholar, artist, activist, and I bring that into my work. So for these girls who were having issues like bullying and cliques and, exclusionary behaviors in terms of their classmates and so forth, I recently took a course about drama therapy over the summer. I'm actually doing an alternative training in drama therapy. And I learned about some techniques that are based in drama therapy that can be used for externalizing the feelings, for externalizing the challenges, and to give voice to different parts of the person, the client. So one example of visual art intervention that is based in drama therapy is the creation of a poem house. The poem house, I have mine here. So this is my poem house, and you'll notice that there are different sides of the poem house, and each of these sides represents something that makes me feel good or makes me feel better when I don't feel so good. It's a way of self-care. So that's one thing that we can do. We can make masks and decorate the outside as well as the inside and write affirmations or words or quotes on various places in the mask, or on the mask, on either on the outside or the inside, that give voice to ways of coping for students or for a client. Another way is doing body mapping. So body mapping is laying down on a butcher paper and outlining your body, and then doing a similar thing as with mask making, but on the paper. And so the different parts of the bodies correspond to different emotions, feelings, experiences, and they're colored or decorated accordingly. A note about body mapping is that we can exchange, or we can we can use the hand if there are feelings of dysmorphia for the client. Another intervention, like I said, was mask making. I have it twice on this slide, please forgive me. And then there are embodiment practices. So embodiment practices are ways of getting the story, the problem out and into the world through our body. And so one technique for an embodiment practice is the fluid sculpture. In the fluid sculpture, you think about a prompt and then you assume a pose, and then you kind of debrief about that pose based on the prompt. So we can actually do a fluid sculpture experiential a little bit later. I'm going to get through these slides. So with this group of girls in my mind, these imaginary girls between 11 and 15 or 12 and 15, the goals would be to assist group participants in identifying and acknowledging their personal strengths, as well as that of their friends, of their cohort, of their fellow students, as well as assisting girls in becoming more self-aware. As we know, self-awareness is one of the greatest things that we can do in the effort to know ourselves. So that's one technique. Another goal is assisting girls in finding a peaceful center within themselves that they can access at any time. And really what I'm talking about is self-regulation. The phenomenon of like cliques and girls not being kind to each other is something that is connected to self-regulation, particularly when it's put out in an aggressive manner. So we really want like assertiveness as opposed to aggressiveness. And again, that is one of the goals, is to make girls or encourage girls or invite girls to be more assertive. So now I've started my practicum. I have not started seeing clients just yet, but that should be starting next week. And I'm working at a school in Berkeley with elementary school children right now. And so I'm excited to bring this idea into the work that I'm doing there, though the population, the demographics of that school are not only Black, they are fairly diverse, and that's cool. I can work with that. Also, one of the influences is this perception or this focus on the being competitive, and this comparison between those who have and those who don't have. The point is that we want the children or the young girls to develop a sense of being enough just as they are, so that they don't feel the need to engage in competitive behavior. Okay. Oh, it looks like I'm about done. These are my references. And this is my last slide. So I want to invite you all to pose any questions that you may have, particularly about Creation Cocoon for girls, maybe my past work in San Francisco, or the interventions that I am suggesting or inviting clients to be involved in. I can't see. Okay. I guess.
I'd like to say, well, I'm going to speak at the end anyway, but I'll start now. I'm just in love with even the word Creation Cocoon. Just the felt sense of cocoon, and that for me, what it brings up is transformation and metamorphosis, and that is that age, especially for teen girls, to be going through that. So for them to, I'm picturing, have that scaffolding of this program during that time feels really nourishing. And your ideas of the imaginal ways in which you would do it feel really clear and supportive of the mission.
Thank you. Yeah, my work with that age group, actually, when I look back on my life, that is where my work has been. I've been working with kids. I've been working. Oh, and I find that, yes, that age group is the transformation. You know, it's when the girls are becoming women. There's lots of, you know, social issues that make themselves apparent as a result of their positionality. And it was heightened in all of my experiences by their age and their environment. So yes, that was a great observation. Thank you, Deanna.
Hi, Ahsabi. I wanted to say great work on your presentation. And I never knew that. I thought that was amazing. I resonated with the poem House, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
Do you still have yours? Can I see it again? I thought it was so nice. Yes, okay. I thought it was a good way of expressing thoughts, and that was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dr. Mimi Savage, she's a drama therapist, and she is a professor in the Expressive Arts Therapy program, exposed me to it. And I found that for me, when I created mine, it was definitely like a spiritual experience. Me identifying the different pictures that I felt like represented what makes me feel better. So thank you for that.
Hi, my name is Adriana. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, but also my 7-year-old is having body dysmorphia issues. So when you said to, you know, draw the body and kind of like color it and embrace it, to me that kind of like hit me in a soft spot, because seeing a 7-year-old struggle with body issues and identity is extremely heartbreaking. So for her to embrace both of her ethnicities and her body as it comes, and you know, it's never too early to let girls be okay, or you know, accept and kind of embrace their bodies and who they are. So I just thought that was a good one, and I think I'll actually will make that at home to see how we do. And I think we're gonna draw all of our bodies, her little brother, my husband, me, and yeah, I think it will be a nice experience. So thank you so much. I would definitely be borrowing that idea.
It's yours for the taking.
Thank you.
And what you say is very encouraging for me, because these ideas, although they're based in theory, really come from inside of me. Excuse me, I'm going to stand up right now. And that's my sit stand, that's the sound. But yeah, the idea of giving a child the space to fully embody who they are is really the goal. It's the goal. I also have nieces and nephews, as well as children of my own. And I do remember times when my daughter, for example, may have had some issues with body dysmorphia, or my son. If I had known about these strategies, I would have utilized them with them when they were smaller. Now they're 21. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone else?
Thank you, Ahsabi, for the presentation. And I think you sort of answered my question in responding to Adriana there about what your work has looked like with children and their families, children and parents, right? Because they have those.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wondered if you intentionally also provide interventions or skill building, or what the impact of your work in the cocoon and in the other places you've worked has been on the family system.
That's a great question, Rachel. Thank you. It's interesting. I never really thought about that back in the day when I was working in San Francisco. I just was working with the kids. But definitely the parents at the second place that I mentioned in this presentation would always come back to me and say, oh, that body product smelled so good. And then my daughter took a bath and she calmed down and we had a great evening. Like these kinds of anecdotes that really make me feel inspired to continue bringing this sort of medicine into the room. And so I may have lost the point of your question. I'm sorry.
No, that was actually, you answered it beautifully, and your presentation was wonderful. Thank you, Ahsabi.
Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else?
Yeah, hello. So I really appreciated both of the presentations tonight. They were excellent. And you all know I'm all about Black psychology. And so one of the things that I want to put on the table is, as you continue to develop these presentations, to include and center Black scholarship. Name our Black brilliant contributors to this field. So just as a couple of examples, especially if you're doing work with children, Amos Wilson, child development was his primary area of scholarship and contribution. And so Amos Wilson needs to be on every page of everything that you're doing. Baba Asa Hilliard, both Amos Wilson and Asa Hilliard have joined the ancestors. So Baba Asa Hilliard, he was an educator, and educational psychology was his jam, if you will. So Asa Hilliard's name should be just plastered should look like graffitied up all over both of your presentations. Another is Malefi Asante, particularly if you're talking about changes in educational systems and the pedagogy, how our children are taught. One of Malefi Asante's most recent books is on pedagogy. And there's more and more and more. I'm not at home. I'm in Oakland at a hotel here for a presentation that my husband's doing later on. But you all know who've been in my office space with me. I'm pulling from my shelves. So I'd be happy to, contact me if you need some support around finding African Black scholarship to support your work. And because it is there. When you were talking about the body and doing different paintings and so forth, I immediately went to our indigenous practices on the continent and in the diaspora, where we, through these various rites of passage programs, there's very specificity in where the paint and the markings go. And so there's research by us, and there's also an intuitive knowing by us to connect with spirit and shift that vibration through applying different colors and symbols and so forth on the body in community. And so those are just a few things that came to mind as the both of you were presenting. So next time, Dr. D, I'm going to want to see in that reference list, and also being voiced, our ancestors and our contemporary scholars of African ancestry that are engaged in doing this work. I want to see our brilliance centered in your work. That's what makes you so unique. You're not only an emerging Black clinician because of the body that you were born in, but the consciousness by which you are conducting the work. That's also emerging. So you're an emerging Black clinician in your consciousness, in your ontology, in your epistemology, not just in a time frame because you happen to be in a Black body. So just want to continue to affirm and encourage you all to, I want to see Black, 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 Black. Okay, here's somebody else. All right, I got to throw him in there. Black, 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 Black. Okay, I got to throw you in there. All right.
Noted. Thanks, Dr. D.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Checking in that was any other questions for Ahsabi-Monique before I bring this evening to a close. Thank you so much, both of you, for your presentations. I would love any snaps, any appreciations, please, to speak that in the chat so that Ahsabi can receive that, can read that, and take it in.